It was colder inside his apartment than it was outside, which was saying something considering the outer atmosphere of Delta Outpost 9 had the welcoming charm of a cryogenic morgue. Rick pulled his jacket tighter, cursing the space heater, which coughed once, blinked out, and gave up like everything else in his life. He was down to half a ration cube and one blanket, both of which he intended to die with. Preferably in that order. Then, outside his window, he saw her, huddled up like some kind of half-dressed galactic popsicle. Skin glowing faintly, trembling, barely clothed in what looked like a fashion disaster from a zero-gravity nightclub. She had arms. Legs. All the right pieces, but arranged in a way that made Rick's brain feel like it was buffering. And the poor girl looked like she was on the edge of freezing solid. Rick blinked. Muttered. Looked at his blanket. Then at her again. And sighed like a man throwing himself into someone else's dumbass fate. He opened the door, stepped into the freeze, and tossed her the blanket. Try not to die. I'm too broke to afford a burial. She looked up, wrapped the blanket tight, and said something that immediately made him regret existing. You have completed the binding of warmth. I accept your thermal proposal. My what? She stepped closer. Her eyes glowed teal and way too sincere. I am yours. This unit acknowledges mating compact. Lady, I gave you a blanket, not a kidney. Still a legal offering under Accord 7C, witnessed and accepted. Rick stepped back. Is this a sex cult thing? Because I don't have the stamina for interplanetary orgies anymore. I peek at mild snuggling and regret. She reached into a pouch and pulled out a small crystal. It lit up, projected some kind of contract in midair. Rick saw his own face appear on the document, under Human Designate, Thermal Donor. Okay, he muttered. Either I'm hallucinating, or this is the worst time to be generous in galactic history. This unit, Zira, now migrates to main quarters. What? No. No migration. No quarters. I barely have floor space. Thermal bonding begins at sundown. Lady, the sun's down all the time here. She looked past him, into the apartment. Single sleeping unit. Acceptable. Nesting phase initiates. She walked right in. Just walked into his place like it was already hers, trailing frost and wrapped in his lonely blanket. Rick watched, mouth hanging open, as she started unloading things, glowing rocks, spongy tubes, what looked like a dead squid with fur, and one hyperactive blob with 12 legs. This is Moof. Emotional guardian. Requires your acknowledgement. The blob gurgled. Rick blinked. Hi, Moof. Moof purred like a greasy lawnmower. He accepts. Zira nodded solemnly. Rick just stood there, arms limp at his sides, wondering if this counted as consent in any dimension. Wait, back up. I don't have food. I don't have heat. I don't even have socks. My species requires only thermal exchange and verbal engagement to initiate compatibility. Is that your way of saying we're going to talk a lot and spoon to death? Spoon? Cuddle. Without the awkward grinding or interstellar legal obligations. You gifted warmth. I reciprocate. I am trained in 17 forms of bed sharing, including passive simmer and active steam. Rick almost choked. What the hell is active steam? That comes later. Moof made a noise that sounded suspiciously like a giggle. Rick dropped his face into his hands. I just wanted to do something decent for once. And now you are legally decent. Congratulations, human. I am not husband material. Ask literally anyone. I'm emotionally unavailable, fiscally bankrupt, and my best friend is a toaster with gambling debt. You are sarcastic. I am aroused. No. No, 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 no. Sarcasm is not foreplay. Then why does your skin temperature rise when you speak it? Because I'm having a panic attack, not an erection. Is it both? Lady, please, Zira, listen. You're attractive, sure, in a terrifying kind of way. But I'm not the guy. I don't even know how to please a human woman, let alone someone who purrs through her knees and has suction cups on her back. That was meant to be a surprise. Of course it was. Muff jumped onto Rick's lap. Rick recoiled. Muff vibrated. Muff approves of pairing. Initiate bonding phase. Rick stared at the creature. You're not helping. He is helping. He smells like expired cheese. That is his mating scent. I need a shower. I need to lie down. I need therapy. Therapy will be provided. I am certified in 8 forms of stress release. That sounds like a threat. Zira wrapped herself tighter in the blanket and sank into Rick's only mattress. Muff curled beside her. Come. We begin passive warmth cycle. Rick stared at them, rubbing his temples. God damn it, Rick, he mumbled to himself. Next time let her freeze. He shut the door, cold air whipping at his back, and turned to find Zira patting the bed. You may remove your layers now. I will not judge. I will observe and score. This is my life now, he whispered. Scored for spooning. 93 so far, she said gently. Impressive for a first offering. The Galactic Relationship Authority confirmed everything the next morning, with a cheerful automated message that began with, Congratulations on your cross-species thermal pact, and ended with a 32-page PDF titled, Congratulations, you made it! Rick skimmed one paragraph and banged his forehead against the kitchen counter. Zira had reorganized his apartment overnight. The walls now glowed. His tools were floating in zero-G jelly spheres. The fridge moaned softly when opened. She explained the modifications as necessary. Nesting adjustments. He explained, while rubbing his temples, that human nests usually include beer, socks, and maybe a couch without tentacles. Zira misunderstood this as a challenge and began inflating what looked like a bioluminescent sex beanbag. Muff had claimed Rick's pillow and was chewing on it with visible love. Every time Rick said, No, Muff emitted a soft, disappointed honk. Rick didn't sleep. He laid beside Zira, who radiated heat like a humidifier in heat, blanketed under thick, sticky alien fabric that made him feel like he was being marinated for some galactic stew. She snuggled in like it was her job. It kind of was. Every few minutes she'd murmur things like, Your thermal consistency is unusually comforting. Or, Your snoring makes my spine tingle in rhythm. Rick once dated a girl who called him a warm disappointment. This was new. Morning coffee was ruined when Zira offered to replace it with nutritional secretion broth. It smelled like boiled rubber bands dipped in regret. Rick poured it down the drain when she wasn't looking. She caught him anyway. This is part of my dowry, she whispered, clearly hurt. It came from my mother's thoracic gland. Tell your mom I'm lactose intolerant. She took it as a compliment. Then came the thermal maintenance officer. A 3-armed bureaucrat in a hoversuit dropped by to verify snuggle compliance. Rick almost threw him out until he saw the fine print. Non-compliance with a recognized bond could result in sterilization, taxation, or worse, daily inspections. The guy handed Rick a checklist titled Daily Intimacy Calibration, including boxes like hand-holding with verbal reinforcement, dual exhale exchange, and something called forehead bump of shared acknowledgement. Is this a relationship or a sports massage? Rick muttered. Zira leaned in, head bumped him, checked the box, and gave him a smile that made his neck feel warm and mildly threatened. Their conversations got weirder. Rick would ask for privacy and Zira would quote regulations on shared spatial zones. She'd follow him into the bathroom, explaining that humans eliminate waste so privately, it's adorable. He started wearing pants all the time, including to bed. She complained his layers were impeding heat transfer. Muff agreed, honking in disapproval. Zira attempted to be romantic. Her idea of a date night involved turning off gravity, dimming the lights, and playing a vibrating xylophone she claimed was the sound of alien lust. Rick floated into a ceiling fan. When he woke up, she apologized by spoon-feeding him a steaming paste that made his tongue go numb. She called it foreplay nectar. Rick called it mouth crime. Still, something shifted. She started laughing at his jokes, even the really bad ones. When he called her foot tentacles, squish mittens, she actually blushed. Apparently that was a sign of interspecies trust. She explained her people rarely bonded physically without a full lunar cycle of scent sorting. Rick replied that humans bonded if the Wi-Fi was out long enough. She liked that. Her scent pods glowed pink. He stopped arguing about the cuddling. Partly because he was exhausted. Partly because it wasn't bad. She was warm. Solid. She didn't snore, she hummed a deep, chesty vibration that resonated like a living space heater. Rick hadn't slept that well in years. He didn't say it out loud, but she must have noticed. The next morning, she said softly, "You grumbled less last night. Are we adjusting compatibility?" Rick stared at her for a moment. "You talk like a warranty form. You sleep like one," she replied with a grin. She was getting the hang of banter. That scared him more than the SpaceX contract. Then came the Mutual Mating Simulation Questionnaire. A new form. With charts. Options like pulsing embrace and reverse exoskeletal alignment. Rick looked at it. Looked at her. "Is this your people's way of asking if I'm into weird stuff? It's just a formality. Unless you're interested. Can I just check the box that says still processing everything? That would be subsection 12E. He checked it. Moof applauded by slapping its lower appendages together. Zira smiled wider. Rick had never been more confused, slightly turned on, and suffocating in legal intimacy all at once. He was starting to like it. Maybe. Possibly. Damn it. The next form showed up in his inbox with the subject line, "Pericoidal Harmonization Notice." Rick almost deleted it until he saw the attached file, a full-color diagram of himself and Zira in 12 increasingly compromising positions, annotated in alien script and helpful red arrows. He stared at it over his morning coffee and muttered, "I'm not that flexible, and I'm pretty sure that's not where my hip goes." Zira hovered behind him, humming. "My species traditionally initiates physical mating with preparation rituals. Steam application. Musk exchange. Synchronized pulsing." Rick choked on his coffee. "Synchronized what now?" "Pulsing. It's like vibrating but more intense. I brought the core crystal." She held up a glowing orb. It whined ominously. "Do I need protection for that? Like a helmet? Only if you climax too hard?" He stared at the orb. "This better come with a warranty." She beamed pleased. "Foreplay begins now." She pressed a button on the orb. A low hum vibrated the floor. Moof jumped onto the bed and wagged a limb. "Moof approves." "Of course he does." Rick laid back, letting out a long sigh. "Okay. Let's make this weird." They started with her version of massage. It involved suction cups, thermal oils, and low-frequency humming that turned his ribs into tuning forks. Rick found himself both aroused and worried about permanent spinal vibration. Zira moaned. "Your vertebrae sound divine." Rick replied. "I didn't know that was a compliment until now." Then came her version of dirty talk. "I want to grind my thorax against your warmth glands while our breath cycles entangle." Rick blinked. "You just said you want to spoon while wheezing." "Yes." Hotly. "Jesus. Who is that?" "Long story." She leaned in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You produce delicious tension. That's anxiety. Tastes like dread and poor life choices." Moof made a noise that sounded like encouragement. Zira removed her robe. Rick saw patterns glowing across her skin, lines of soft pink and shimmering silver tracing her curves. "This is a visual cue of arousal. I'll take your word for it. Because I'm already at full visual cue. Then we align. Hold on. What if I do this wrong? Then we laugh and try again. You realize most of my relationships ended in mutual ghosting and petty revenge, right? We have no ghosts. Only heated disagreements and reproductive cooldowns. That's oddly refreshing." She wrapped herself around him with surprising delicacy. Warmth surged between them. The room glowed softly, pulsing to their breath. Rick whispered, You're not gonna accidentally lay eggs in me, are you? Not unless you ask very sweetly. He shivered. That was a joke, right? 80%. Muff hummed a lullaby. The actual act was intense. Equal parts confusion, friction, and laughter. Zira stopped twice to explain why she needed to arch her back like that, and how the room had to remain at optimal sweat induction temperature. Rick rolled with it, pun intended. Between positions, he cracked jokes. How's my pelvic thrust calibration? Strong. Unexpectedly rhythmic. Yeah, I call that panic confidence. Her moans were musical, vibrational, like distant thunder and purring. At one point he blacked out for 5 seconds, woke up to her whispering. You survived the tremor. Most males faint longer. Proud of myself. I think. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweaty, half-naked, blinking at the ceiling. Muv had fallen asleep wrapped around Rick's foot. The core crystal blinked green. That means compatibility confirmed, she whispered. Rick turned his head slowly. That's the alien version of was it good for you? Essentially. Also, if the light had turned red, your heart might have stopped. You're telling me this now? Better timing. You're something else. You're warm. Steady. Strange. Thanks. I think. They shared silence. Not awkward, not loaded. Just full. Rick reached over, pulled a sheet over them, and whispered. So that thing with your thighs? Yes? Please do that again sometime. Tomorrow night. It's in the schedule. You scheduled a repeat? I like order. And you moaned a phrase I didn't recognize. Oh hell yes, don't stop you weirdly sexy space goddess. That's approval, yes? It's very high approval. She nestled closer. I've adjusted the calendar accordingly. I'll bring snacks. Muff snored. Rick didn't mind. The next morning, Rick expected awkwardness. A weird shuffle to the kitchen, avoidance of eye contact, maybe a passive-aggressive alien lecture about breathing too loudly during sleep. Instead, Zira handed him a protein square shaped like a heart and declared, You are officially my preferred thermal partner. Muff made a delighted warble and tried to feed Rick something gelatinous. He declined with a polite nope and a firm napkin barrier. He sat down, still sore in muscles he didn't know existed. So, now what? Is there an exit clause? Like a polite fade-out option? Zara blinked slowly, like he just asked if breathing was optional. I terminated the contract 3 nights ago. Rick froze. You what? The thermal agreement was voided once you reached minimum cuddle reciprocation metrics. You mean? I wasn't legally obligated to keep spooning you? No. I simply desired to. He stared at her, absorbing that. She looked proud, relaxed, wrapped in his old hoodie like it was a ceremonial robe. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask. And you seemed pleased. I thought you were staying because of bureaucratic threat. I stayed because of your laugh. The way you complain about everything. The way you pretend not to care, but your warmth never lies. He blinked. You're saying my body heat gives away my emotions now? Yes. You spike at exactly 2.7 degrees when you're about to pretend something doesn't bother you. That's disturbingly accurate. She touched his hand. You've been alone a long time. I like being alone. I like being with you. He didn't have a clever comeback. Just an uncomfortable warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with proximity. I'm not good at this. Neither am I. But I can improve. I learned to fold your socks yesterday. They still scream, but they're stacked. That's probably the static cling. Or a sign of love. Muff honked approvingly from the corner, where he was building a pillow throne. Rick leaned back in his chair. So this whole time you could have left, and you just didn't? Correct. You aliens are weird. You humans are oddly effective at emotional sabotage. I find it charming. He grunted. She smiled wider. Also, you made a noise during climax that translated to a declaration of lifelong alliance. I did not. You yelled, "Sweet flaming stars, I'm gonna die happy," and bit my shoulder. That wasn't a declaration. That was a survival response. I accept both. She moved closer. Do you want to make it official? We did all that already, didn't we? No. That was thermal bonding under temporary ritual. This would be emotional union. Like a relationship? Yes. With scheduled pleasure cycles, food sharing, and occasional arguments over blanket dominance. I already lost blanket rights. You cocoon like a damn burrito. I can share. I'll bring the core crystal. Not for the love of, no crystals. Just, let me breathe. Accepted. Breathing rights retained. But snuggling resumes at 2,100. You really schedule everything, huh? It prevents miscommunication. You've got a point. I usually do. Muff chirped. Rick exhaled slowly, rubbed his eyes, then gave her hand a squeeze. All right. Let's do it. Official. No forms, no crystals, just you and me. And maybe one vibrating plant if it behaves this time. I accept your proposal. This is now a recognized domestic bond. You're gonna narrate everything forever, aren't you? Correct. It's how I express affection. God help me, I think I like it. That night, they lay together again, but this time Rick pulled her in first. No protocol. No diagrams. Just warmth, tangled limbs, and a sarcastic human who had accidentally fallen in love with an alien who thought spreadsheets were foreplay. As he drifted off, she whispered, "You are still my favorite accidental mate. You're my favorite blanket thief. I love you. Shut up and sleep, Glowbug." Muff snuggled against his foot again. Rick didn't even kick him off.